So there are ways of moving property across into your company without there being any immediate tax consequences. This is a move by Treasury and by SARS in order to promote the incorporation of new companies and the investment in businesses. As a person, if you're holding a property in your personal name and you want to contribute it into a business, into a company, you are actually free to do so. And there are provisions in the Income Tax Act that allow you to do this without consequences such as capital gains or any sort of income tax. Now, with respect to VAT and transfer duty, there are also ways of applying this provision from the Income Tax Act to defer payments of any VAT or transfer duty, or rather actually basically make the transaction completely tax neutral. Now, where we need to have an understanding on what the consequences of this, these provisions are, is the fact that, remember, number one, the capital gains provisions only amount to a deferral, as an example. Basically meaning that at some point in time, there will be a consequence. When this company, the transferee that receives the property, decides that they're going to dispose of it, the tax has simply been deferred, meaning that now you will have to recalculate the tax, and on disposal at that point in time, the full capital gains tax would typically land up being paid. So that's just one thing to bear in mind, is this isn't supposed to be considered a tax-free mechanism. It's just simply a tax deferral. Now, how it normally works is a person, for example, or a company would own a property and would want shares in another company. They would transfer this property to the other company, in exchange for which they would receive shares in that company in return. So this would be almost an equal exchange. I give R1 million and I receive R1 million worth of shares. So if the company is worth nothing and you put a property in that company, you would typically receive the R1 million back in shares. So you would normally land up being 100% shareholder. Whereas if that company already has another property worth R1 million, and now you contribute this property, chances are that you would only receive 50% of the shares, because the company already has R1 million worth of assets. Now, where this is important from an estate planning perspective, and this doesn't work with trusts. So you cannot transfer your property to a trust hoping to get it into the trust, because there are no shares to exchange. Similarly, if the company is under the trust, same thing's going to happen. The shares need to go into your name as owner of that property. It can't go into one of your trusts. So one of the downsides of this when it comes to estate planning is it doesn't necessarily assist you with estate planning as much as it assists you with structuring and some kind of tax deferral. So that's the one thing to bear in mind, is people normally come to me with this question when it comes to estate planning, and it's not really a tool for estate planning. What it does sometimes assist with is movement of property into a company, which does offer some asset protection. So from a business perspective, that's typically a good idea. And it does optimize your ability to obtain finance. So from an affordability perspective, if you've got many loans in your personal name, and now you move it into a company and the company takes out the loans, because remember, at the end of the day, you are still making this exchange. And if you've got a bond, for example, you'd have to get some kind of finance in order to cover that bond. So effectively, what you're doing is you're moving the loan from your personal name into the company, and that clears your personal name from debt, which now sits in the company instead. So from a financing perspective, it's actually a really great mechanism. From an asset protection perspective, really great mechanism. But ultimately, from an estate planning perspective, keeping assets in a trust so that when you pass away, you don't have to worry about things like estate duty. From that perspective, unfortunately, it doesn't do much.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much.